Hey there, it's Olivia Savannah here from Olivia's Catastrophe, and today I'm very excited to sit on the floor by my lower bookshelves and give you some recommendations for this year's Gothtober. So if you missed the announcement video, I'll leave it linked down below, but me, Tish and Hannah are here across all of our channels to recommend you books that might fit for the Gothtober theme. Now I'm going to be splitting my recommendations into different ways. I'm going to start with ones that fit the Wakanda prompts, so my world, my galaxy I should say, within the Prophetic Galaxies Gothtober theme is all about Wakanda, which is about reading diversity, which is about reading sci-fi gothic books. So first I'll be giving you recommendations that could fit some of those prompts, then I'm going to open it wider to just be some more gothic recommendations overall, and then I'm going to end with some that are on my TBR but could fit for either of those two batches of books. So without further ado, let's get right down to the books and giving you some recommendations. Starting off with the sci-fi gothic feeling books that fit the Prophetic Galaxies recommendations, the first one I'm going to recommend to you is World War Z by Max Brooks, and this one is a fictional account of a zombie apocalypse. And even though it's a fictional account, it's written as if it's a non-fiction. It's written in the format as it's really happened, and these are how the countries responded, and this is how people responded, this is what the political landscape looked like, and this is what the social political landscape looks like. And I personally really loved this. I think it was a genius form of storytelling. It was engaging and kept me captivated all the way through, and because it's a zombie apocalypse and looks like the science and the political situations, it definitely fits into the Prophetic Galaxies prompts, especially as it also talks medically about what it means to be a zombie quite a bit. The next one I'm going to recommend for this is What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher, and this one has a trans, I believe non-binary main character, and I did recommend this one last year as well, but I think it's such a good recommendation for this as well. It's very much something creepy is going on, something that's unsettling in this very isolated house, and the person who we're following goes to visit their friend who is not very well in this house where they live with their husband, and it's about what's going on in this house. And there's a lot of strange rabbits around, hares I should say, and I think because of the way that this concludes, it does fit into the Prophetic Galaxies prompt. Don't want to give you any spoilers, so I can't say more than that, but it's a very strange book, but it does it very well. Frankenstein retellings will be a perfect fit for that. That's like the melding of science and gothic. So you could actually read Frankenstein by Mary Shelley for this prompt quite easily, which is about somebody who is a scientist and he creates a man from like dead body parts and brings him to life. And it's about what happens when that man is brought to life. He's very ugly, he wants to be able to fit into society, and the consequences of bringing to life what should not have been brought to life. And so retellings of this is going to be another thing that fits into the sci-fi gothic theme. So I'm going to recommend M's for Munster, which is a graphic novel retelling of Frankenstein where somebody's sister has passed away, and so she tries to bring her sister back to life, but her sister is not the same. She doesn't remember the past, and she's trying to pretend, the monster is trying to pretend that she does remember the past because she doesn't want to be broken down and experimented upon again. A lot of the monster classics are going to work for this, so think Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I really love that gothic classic, and it's very short. You might know quite a bit about this one already because it's very famous, but it's about this like man who has two sides to his personality and why that is, and it has to do a little bit with experimentation, which is leaning into the science element. I'm also going to recommend The Invisible Man by H.G. Wells, which is my favourite H.G. Wells that I've read thus far, and in this one it's about a man who is invisible and how he came to be invisible, which has a lot to do with sciences, but also it is gothic because of what he chooses to do when he is given that invisibility. You can read other H.G. Wells for this prompt as well, such as The Island of Dr. Moreau or The War of the Worlds, but The Invisible Man is the one that I want to recommend. Lots of Afrofuturism could fit for this prompt. I will of course be recommending you The Fifth Season, which is one of my favourite Afrofuturist books of all time. It's by N.K. Jemisin, and it's the beginning of a trilogy, and in this trilogy origins exist and they have the power to manipulate the earth, but they are the oppressed in this society, and it's a post-apocalyptic world. Pretty much dystopian post-apocalyptic worlds really suit the prophetic galaxies theme, but this one in particular, it just feels so gothic in the way that the plot unravels and builds, in the way that it's using a very unique writing style because some of this is written in second person, and the way in which it's a plot-driven book but characterization is where a lot of the tension lies. One of my absolute favourites is Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. This is for if you want something that's very eerie and strange and open-ended and a bit wishy-washy when you read it, but in the very best way. And Annihilation is about this area that's been like taken over by this alien substance, and it's about a group of people who venture in to this area to find out what's going on. They are scientists and they are there to test, find out what the situation is, and then come back out. But when they go in, they may discover something, which means they may not be able to come back out. The film is also very good if you're looking to watch something that matches the prophetic galaxies theme. I have to recommend 1984 by George Orwell. I just feel like it's such a natural fit to this, what with it being set in a dystopian world where someone is always observing you and always watching you, and that's quite gothic in the way that people always feel like there's something supernatural watching them in a gothic book, and then it being so far into the future and yet dystopian is where the scientific side, the sci-fi side to this book comes in. And similarly, I have to recommend Tender is the Flesh by Agustina Bazterrica, which is one of the creepiest books I've ever read and the one that has made me feel the most disgusted in my soul. It's set in a future where meat is supposedly infected, and so you cannot eat any of the animals, and instead humans have decided to breed humans which can be eaten. It's very poignantly written, and it does go really deep into the fact that cannibalism is happening, so do be ready for that. But it also talks about the ways in which language enables us to do what we're doing or what we're not. What are the rights of humans in a way which makes you think, what are animal rights in our present day? And I just think the use of metaphor, the use of feeling haunted by the decisions that you are participating in or making, and the fact that it is so horrifying definitely lends it into the sci-fi gothic realm. I recently read and absolutely loved the first 15 Lies of Harry August, and this one is leaning a bit more into the sci-fi than into the gothic, but I do think it fits the theme overall. It's about this person called Harry August, of course, who is living his life again and again. He's basically essentially in a time loop, but it does have elements of time travel to the way that the narrative is playing. And he gets a message from the future that the world is ending, and he is trying to figure out why it's ending and who could be the one causing this. And in doing so, it kind of kicks off this really fascinating journey which feels quite historical, but at the same time it's also futuristic, and he's kind of being haunted by the messages that are being passed down in time to guide him on his self-proclaimed quest to figure out what's happening. And then we get to a couple of books that I've recommended before, but it would be remiss of me not to recommend them again for Gothtober. So we have Binti by Nnedi Okorafor. I do think this fits into the sci-fi gothic theme because it's about somebody who is going to this school in this futuristic world, and she is traveling on a spaceship to get there when a massacre suddenly happens and the ship is attacked by this other alien force, and it's about the choices that she makes while that's happening, and a lot of this has to do with colonialization. And I appreciated the fact that it could tackle such a big theme in such a short novella. It's sci-fi and it's set in the future, but it's also quite gothic in the way that it's talking about like massacre and paying for the crimes that have been committed to people before in the past, and how that generational trauma still continues to haunt you. Speaking of generational trauma, we have to also be recommending Beloved by Toni Morrison. This is a literary fiction book for those who want to participate in Gothtober but read something a little bit more literary, and it's about an ex-slave who has moved away from that life, who is past it, but she is still very much haunted by what she experienced in that time and the things that she did or needed to do to survive her time as a slave. But in this present day, someone who she used to know back from her slavery days has come by to her town and found her, and it's digging up a lot of emotions, a lot of experiences, and a lot of trauma that she needs to face head on. And I absolutely love this book. It's 10 out of 10, no notes from me. The writing is absolutely magical and amazing and masterful, and the way that Toni Morrison guides you through this story, you are just along for a smooth ride. I also needed to recommend Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno-Garcia, which I just think is peak Gothic. It's literally in the title, you can't go wrong with this. And it's again one of those like isolated, big, lavish houses where someone within it is not doing too well and something seems amiss, something seems strange, everything looks like it's rotting, and it's what is causing that. While this is quite a bit like fantasy, sci-fi in terms of the causes once you discover them, it's also written in that beautiful cadence, that slow pace unraveling that Gothic books like to do so very much. And the last one I'm going to recommend for this category is The Deep by Rivers Solomon. This is a bit longer than a novella about slaves who are thrown overboard and they become mermaids when they're thrown overboard. But there's also a lot of generational trauma that is handed down through the years because of their origins of how they became mermaids. So generational trauma, Gothic theme that we are experiencing in this one, but also a lot of it has to do with like moving on from that and new hope. And it is sci-fi in a way because of the ways that the mermaids work and the ways in which they pass on memory. So I want to quickly recommend you some overall Gothic books that could work for various prompts if you're not into or not too keen to read along the sci-fi theme. And I'm going to start with something that seems a bit rogue, but we're going with it because one of the prompts is Dark Desires, and that is The Court of the Vampire Queen by Katee Roberts, which is a very steamy vampire romantasy book. And it is so very good. It was delicious. I ate that right up, and you'd be surprised how much steamy moments could become part of the plot in this one. If you like queer, polyamorous, loads of sex in a book, then you should read this one. It's a whole load of fun. You'll have some very fun nights. I'm also going to recommend Everything the Darkness Eats by LaRocca. This one is a novella which is like, how do I even describe this? It's so abstract, and it's where people have been going missing in this town, and the reason they've been going missing has to do with this mysterious figure that nobody can quite place their name on. So if you like a bit of abstract horror, if you like something along the lines of Annihilation but less sci-fi heavy and a bit more spiritual and fantasy heavy, then you are going to like Everything the Darkness Eats. It's one of those open-ended books and the descriptions in it are delicious, and I had a very good time. I'll also recommend I Feed Her to the Beast and the Beast is Me. This is by Jemisin, and it's like a young adult dark academia ballet book where a young black ballerina is sent to this school where she needs to prove her worth, and as part of that she makes a deal with this sea of blood that she discovers to be the best ballerina there is. However, making this deal comes with consequences, and everything about her life starts to decay before her very eyes. And I really enjoyed reading this one. It was pitched to me as a horror, and I definitely think it falls more into the brutal, cutthroat, ballerina, dark academia space instead, but it's a very good read. The writing in it is lovely, and that young black anger that our main character harbours within her heart is definitely something I can relate to. I also recommend You Look Better as a Ghost by Joanna Wallace. This one is a bit of a satirical, dark humour serial killer book and it's about this woman who's a serial killer. She thinks that certain people look better as a ghost. You do one wrong thing to her and she will chase you and kill you, but she's getting a bit slapdash with her kills and things are starting to catch up to her, and also at the same time she's grieving for a parent while she becomes involved with this elderly home. And I enjoyed it. I laughed. I questioned whether I should be laughing, but I appreciated it. I appreciated it a lot. Dead Man Wonderland is a manga that I recently read. It has to do with this child who is accused of murdering all of his schoolmates, but it was not him, and he gets sent to this kind of amusement park youth prison where he is trying his very best to stay alive. The concept is a bit wild when you put it like that, but I've only read the first volume and I think it's a very quick and easy Gothtober read, especially if you want to read something by an Asian author or translated. Carmilla by Sheridan Lee Vanu. This one is one of the very first vampire novels. It's a novella as well, so it's very short, and it's 100% those vampiric Gothic vibes. A very slow, build into discovering what a vampire is and who might be the vampire among them. The City Beautiful by Aidan Polydoros was a young adult historical fantasy book I read earlier this year, and it has a lot of those gothic vibes. The world that they're living in is very nitty-gritty, and it's about these boys who are incredibly poor, and his friend dies and his friend kind of possesses him, and in that possession he is slowly being like taken over, and what he needs to do is find out who murdered his friend and get revenge to be able to like get rid of his friend possessing him. And it was so good. It has a lot of Jewish representation in it, and from what I've heard, the Jewish representation is very good. I learned a lot about like historical Jewish culture, and probably also present day Jewish culture that I didn't know before. I felt for these characters, I shipped the queer romance that we get to see, but really it's just these poor teens trying to do their best in a world that is not welcoming for them. And I loved it. For the werewolf fans among us, and especially for those who enjoyed Twilight, I do have to recommend Wolf Song by TJ Klune. This is a found family, Sad Boys in the Woods series that I started in January and I cannot get enough of. It's fantastic. It's very easy to read, even though it's 500 pages, you'll absolutely blitz through it. And if you just want to just have werewolves trying to find happiness with each other and falling in love, and most of them are queer and there's so many rants and jokes, this is the series for you. Serpent and the Wings of Night by Krista Broadbent. I am not really a romantasy girly, but I read this one. It might be to do with the vampires, it might be to do with the good quality of the storyline, but I absolutely fell for it. The best way that I can describe this is the Hunger Games with the vampires, because you are set in this world where vampires exist and she is the only human amongst them, and she enters into these games where if you win the games, you will be able to get one wish granted by this goddess. But in these games it's kind of a fight to the death, it's a survival, and she might have to ally with vampires, she might have to sacrifice things that she didn't know that she needed to sacrifice. It's got high stakes and it's go from the first page, and even though it's a romantasy, I would say the romance is incredibly slow burn, which I personally love, a nice slow burn romance, and also it is not all about the romance. There is plot there is character there, and Araya is one of the lead female characters that I've liked the most this year. I also read The Picture of Dorian Gray this year by Oscar Wilde, and if like me you have not read it yet, you need to get on it because it is actually such a beautifully written book. It is gothic, it's about a man who kind of exchanges his eternal youth for a painting. And it's just written so well. The art theory in it, the discussions on who the artist is, the purpose of the artist, what the artist owns after they've made their product, all of that, I ate it up and enjoyed reading it. And yes, lovely homoerotic vibes as well. And last but not least, I'm going to recommend you Spirits Abroad by Zen Cho. In previous years I have recommended Blackwater Sister. If you haven't read that one, what are you doing? Go and read it. But if you already have and you want more Zen Cho, or you want to start with some fantasy short stories, then this is a collection for you, my friend. It has lots of lesbian representation, it has a lot of Asian Gothic mythology. Think hungry ghosts, think dragons, think spirits, think their version of vampires, and they are in this short story collection, and every single short story is so good. I had multiple 5-star short stories while reading. And if you're curious about some sci-fi gothic books that I want to read, I'm just going to list off their titles and you can look into them a bit more because this video is getting quite long. But the first one is Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. I also want to read Sorrowland by Rivers Solomon, A Carter Witch by Nnedi Okorafor, of course. I want to read Jed Nation by Justina Ireland, and I want to read Murderbot by Martha Wells. And those are just a couple of the sci-fi gothic books that I have planned to read in my future. They're not necessarily on my TBR for Gothtober because I do have my own prompts list that I need to complete, and if you don't have a prompts list that you need to complete, make sure you click on the Gothtober announcement videos down below so you can figure out how you can make your own TBR for this readathon. That's all from me today, and I'll be seeing you with more Gothtober themed content a bit closer to the time. Keep an eye on our Twitter for more information. I'll also be sharing the calendar once we have it in my channel updates section, and then our TBRs will be coming a bit closer towards the end of September. that's it from me, folks. Please let me know in the comment section down below if you have any sci-fi gothic recommendations, but also if you just have any gothic-y horror book recommendations. I am always down for reading more within these genres. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, hit the subscribe button if you want to see more, and don't you forget to hit that notification bell to be updated every time I have a new video. And you know what they say, onwards and upwards. Excelsior!
Thank you.